What's up, guys? Max here with another episode of the ScuttleButt Show, and today we have a very special guest returning. It's Joe Musselman, founder, original CEO of the Honor Foundation, who was on the show before, and there's another great episode linked in the description where we talk about Joe and his story of how he went from, civilian to joining the Navy to starting the Honor Foundation. So go check that out. And he's back joining us again today to talk about Fathom Ventures and what he's got going on in his life. Joe, what's up? How are you?
Yeah, it's great to be here, man. Thank you for having me again.
It's an honor, truly. I know I said last time, I just actually listened to our episode when I was walking my dog a couple days ago because I really enjoyed it and I wanted to refresh on what we had gotten to in our conversation. And I said, you were the guest I've wanted to have on the show the most since I've met you. And because the whole show, the whole ScuttleButt Show exists because of the Honor Foundation and because of what you built over there with the team and all the people that I met. And so thank you for everything, all the impact you've had on my life. I talk about THF on the show in almost every episode. And I tell everyone I meet who it's relevant information for about it. And whenever I talk about how I started the show, it's the story of, transition and transformation and meeting so many extremely talented, motivated people, and feeling like there was a need to share some of this valuable information and share stories as much as possible.
Love it. I love it, man. That's very wonderful to hear. It makes me feel very good. Those statements are like commission checks for me. So
well, good.
I love it. Thank you.
And last time we, like I said, we talked about your whole story. So I don't want to go through that whole thing again. People should go back and listen to that episode because it's amazing. Now, one thing I did want to bring back up that we talked about in the last episode was talking about course corrections. So in life, I've heard people say you never quit. I've heard people say you quit every day, and I think the truth is more like you quit every day. But there's always something, and sometimes quitting's the appropriate thing to do. If you, depending on how you look at it, what your perspective is, sometimes you stop something and one person could say it's quitting and another person could say it's course correction because that course was the wrong course to be on, or it was time to diverge, and and that stuck with me. And since the last time that we talked, I ended up, I don't know if you heard the episodes where I talked about, I got robbed twice in about a month, lost virtually everything that I used for filmmaking and podcasting.
That I just smiled at that.
No, it's
not.
No. It's a course correction, right? So I ended up in a rushed move out of San Diego to Japan, where I originally thought I was going to be leaving in December or January, and I left in September. And my course had shifted greatly in a very short period of time. That's something I kept going back to, which is as I'm leaving San Diego and I'm leaving my job, I'm not quitting my job. I'm not quitting my life in San Diego, and there's no failure here. And even though like some bad stuff happened right at the end that kind of reset how I was doing business, it was a course correction and not a failure, not a quit. And I tell people that all the time about course correction. And that was a great point.
Yeah. And something else I think about with course correction and just life, like I just had this conversation this week about there's not a single person walking around every day that has not at some point in their life asked themselves this question: what's next? Every single person is guilty of asking themselves that, whether it was with a relationship, either successful or not successful, on the personal side or the business side. It doesn't matter. Like, that is a question that lives deep within all of us. And, I'm sitting here looking at my little stoic thinker statue here. And I'm always reminded when I look at that of like, okay, what's next? And with course correction, I think, like, thinking through my life, I did a very big deep dive. I figured I put together this 12 to 15 week program to help transition, the most elite of our war fighters into their next great adventure in life. I, put things down on paper. I knew there needed to be a deep dive into you. As you know, the first 6 weeks of the Honor Foundation it's called You. And we spend 6 weeks only talking about ourselves, which is super uncomfortable for the majority of people, let alone a subsection of a subsection of a deeper subsection of the military, and then 5 communities deep inside of the special operations community. Having them sit down for 6 weeks and talk about themselves was in fact very difficult, and that was the point, because it's hard. Um, and I'm working on this graph in front of me to talk about like the 0 to 1 idea of getting an operator comfortable in the transition mindset takes 12 to 15 weeks. And people ask me why, what does the Honor Foundation do? It's like, if that was all we did, was at that point of time, pivot the operator to begin thinking about, course correct the operator to begin thinking about how they're going to be comfortable just in that transition space, not about getting a job. Like anyone can get a job. First, we have to get people comfortable within that kind of course correction state, because now circling back to the point, the reason why people look at course correction the wrong way, I think, and why it could be fear-filled versus a fearless point in your life, it's because they look at it as complete but not finished. And what I mean by that, so like even for me at the Honor Foundation, my time as CEO, I felt complete in that role. My work for the Honor Foundation will never be finished. So when you transition from the operational community and the operational side, your time in the community is complete. Your love, your passion, your memories, your camaraderie is never finished with the community. So there's, just like any book, we don't get fearful as we approach the end of a chapter, right? Oh no, it's the end of a chapter. Like, what are we going to do? No, you're complete with that chapter, but you're not finished with the story. And I wish more people would look at when they find themselves asking, and this is also coming from a place of like, I have spent the last 10 months reading everything on Stoic philosophy that I could, rereading some things from Epictetus to Socrates to Aristotle to Thomas Aquinas, and a lot of Kant. And what these people keep coming back to is there are just certain things in life that are absolutely invariable. We know that we know, thanks to Freud and so many other people, that we have seasons of life. Like we enter different seasons of life all the time. And by the way, we also know, so that's a fact, that we enter into different seasons of our lives. Number one. Number two fact is that life is really hard and life is a struggle, no matter who you are, because it's all relative. People struggle here. I don't troll often, by the way. I don't. I literally am so anti-troll. However, last week, first time in many years, many years, someone posted something on LinkedIn that was so out of line, and it just reeked of a really horrible mindset to be promoting to the world. And it was about COVID. And if the world doesn't know, right now we're talking to you in quarantine. If people from the future are listening to this, and we're all sitting in our room and we don't know what's outside, and it's been this very confusing time for the world. But regardless, when I was, thinking of, shoot, the COVID thing just made me lose my train of thought. Help me come back to my thought.
You were talking about LinkedIn, the person posted on LinkedIn.
So the trolling. So he posted something that was so disconcerting. He said, the title of the article is we're all in the same boat. And I thought to myself, is that ever wrong? So maybe this is one of those titles that it's supposed to be clickbait, right? And I read through the article, but he was making the pitch that we are in fact all in the same boat as we go through this together. Now, mind you, I'm looking at this person who's posting this. He has his job. He has a home. He mentioned in there something about home care for his children. So clearly affluent to the point where he can afford support at the house for him and his wife and his 3 kids. So not in the same boat. And the whole article kind of reeked of that. There's people without jobs. Our country is going to enter into 20 to 25% unemployment rate. Service professionals are without work and pay in most cases. And to navigate the government payments has been a challenge for some people who might not have the access. So again, I didn't like blow him up on his public channel. I sent him a DM, but like I just had to Let him know. And to his credit, as a leader should, he responded back, "Thank you. That's a really good perspective." And he took it down after he apologized for it because he hadn't seen it through that way. And I thought that was a very good approach. So just icing on the cake and the point that you were trying to make, course corrections, it's a fact. We know life is hard. We know course corrections are going to come. And the reason why I brought up Stoic philosophy and just Stoic thinking in general, there are things we can control and there are things we cannot. As soon as we learn how to carry those bricks around the situation that we can control, and we put the bricks down and we understand that there's some things we can fix and there's other things we cannot. So that's what I would say on a course correction note, that just because a chapter is complete, it does not mean that you are finished.
Can I tell you something? And I have a question for you.
Please.
So I've been talking to people. I've been following up with a lot of the brick and mortar businesses that we've had on the ScuttleButt Show. And one of them is down in Imperial Beach, and it's Good Times Barbershop. The guy who runs it is a Navy veteran. He was a corpsman, and his name's Adam. And it's a really awesome place. I love getting my haircut there. Those are like, your buddies when you go in there. Yeah. They've got a keg on tap. I think they've had a Protector brewery in there on tap on some rotations. Mike has a lot. Anyway, he's been closed down since the middle of March. And when I was talking to him, he said he hasn't been able to get any government assistance. He didn't get any of the SBA money, and he's trying to navigate all the systems. He said he's on the phone every day. And you know what he said? It's funny because that analogy about we're all in the same boat. You know what he said? We're all in the same ocean, but everyone's in a different boat.
That's right.
And you gotta, and he said that because he said when he's talking to people on the phone with like trying to get his money, he said, or like some assistance, not get his money that like as if somebody owes him money, but knowing that assistance is being floated around, the word assistance, like where is it? How do I get it?
Right.
Am I eligible? Because you got me closed down. Like you got the businesses closed down. You talking about the government assistance. How do I get it? Well, he said when he brought that up because he said when he talks to people now, he tries to be mindful of the fact that even though we're all in different boats, we're in the same ocean. And that's true of life in general. That's right. And I thought that was a really good expression of the situation.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah. And as long as you remember, you're in your boat, and your boat might not be as nice as the yacht, but it's not as bad as the dinghy,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
And everyone's got a yacht and a dinghy that they're comparing themselves to.
That's right.
And then a question. I have this question, and I feel like it might be a listener question, especially because with military thought processes, deployments. When you talk about Stoic philosophy, my question is, what is the difference between Stoic philosophy from what you've, learned, because you've been obviously reading and studying a lot, and like compartmentalization? How do you rationalize with Stoicism what's happening as opposed to compartmentalizing it?
So that's a great question. So I want to be clear too on the question. So in psychology, when we talk about compartmentalizing things, it means as if you were to take something, put it in a box in a compartment, and you leave it there. You compartmentalize your feelings. You compartmentalize your anger. You compartmentalize the feelings you have for your family or your mother or your father. You compartmentalize the issues that have impacted you or shaped you emotionally, either positively or negatively. So do I have that in the sense correct as to how you are bringing that up in this context? That's what you mean by compartmentalize.
Yeah, and in application, I mean, as things come, you, instead of having them cloud your judgment, affect your mindset, you compartmentalize them. So you can, in essence, to allow yourself to make clear-headed decisions, not affected by the immediate actions happening around.
So in that definition, I'd say that what I just outlined is a negative side of compartmentalizing. So the biggest differentiator, I would say, between that form, which is a negative form of compartmentalizing, versus what Stoicism promotes from within, is that yes, you want to compartmentalize, but the whole point to compartmentalize it is to study, is to look at yourself. And there's a huge difference there. So, like, for instance, one of the favorite, lines and coaching I've ever received was, when you need to watch yourself like you would a stranger. And when you think about that, like a stranger you're trying to understand, you need to watch yourself like a snake. It's like when you think about how a snake, if you ever watched an actual snake, he has no reaction. Black eyes, cold as steel. And there's never a reaction. You don't ever see snakes laugh or frown or have any feeling towards any type of emotion, left or right, which in some, in cases, in other mammals and reptilian, you would see some sort of reaction, but not with a snake. It's cold. And when you watch yourself like a snake, and you think of yourself, of watching yourself like a stranger, you begin to look at your feelings a little differently. And the biggest shift, I would say, in compartmentalizing what's happening is, everyone should know that it's a fact to feel anxiety. Like, anxiety is in fact not a weakness or a strength or anything. It's human to feel anxiety. It's what we choose to do with the anxiety that we feel. And there's also different tiers of folks that feel anxiety. Some feel less, some feel more. Some overblow things. Oh my God, there's the justification anxiety. We're like, oh, I knew this was going to happen. I felt it coming. Like, there's that, it proved, cognitive bias, that the world is always going to end. Now this just proves that I've been right for the last decade. But, keeping it very pointed to your question, it's like there's good compartmentalizing, which is I'm compartmentalizing to understand versus I'm compartmentalizing to ignore. I would say Stoicism forces you to compartmentalize because and to study and to know and to understand, because that's how we get to know ourselves. The classic, know thyself from Socrates. It's a quote underneath one of my core values, which is be you, which is very hard to do because first you have to understand who you are. And, to cap that off, if we did lean to Stoicism, in this case, it's like the toughest question that I've asked some of the entrepreneurs that I've been working with is, when you watch yourself, what do you see? And that's a tough question. And it's supposed to be, because think about the times, and this can be asked right now, like as we go through this, like when we watch ourselves as we go through this, like what do we see? Do we see someone that is acting rationally? Do we see someone that's looking at numbers and data, or do we go inward, which is what I've been doing, and let's focus on, let's be values driven and morally driven in this, and let's reconnect with family. Let's love on my wife more than I've ever loved on my wife before. Let's count our blessings every morning, that I have my health, that I do have a home, that I do have a job, and that I'm grateful for everything in my life, which completely flips the stressors of everything else that's being promoted all over the world. And we know that media going back 200 years, or the media that's 20 minutes ago, it doesn't matter. They always promote the extreme because it's what sells. So we know that by design, media for 200 years, what do you think sold papers back in the day? Okay, I grew up watching Newsies, right? Newsies, they held it up and they would yell the headline, and it was the worst thing they could possibly yell. Why? To sell papers. It's the same thing here. So I don't pay much attention to that. And I try to remain objective as possible, and thinking that I'm up in the air, kind of watching myself like a snake, and watching my actions. And when I look at myself, what do I see? Which gets into a deeper line of questioning that that maybe that's another episode. But that's what I think about compartmentalization. We either naturally do it, we have to be taught to kind of do it to better understand ourselves and our reactions. But I know I want to strive to be someone that is able to take something in, ask myself why I feel a certain way, dissect it, and think about it hard before I react. The biggest disease I think in the world is impulsivity. And one thing that I'm trying to do is like from what I that timeline that I just outlined is okay, something happened. I'm feeling a reaction to that, whatever happened, and now I'm processing the feelings. I'm trying to shorten the time frame it takes for all of those things to happen to where I can actually react, but all of that process has taken place, in fact, in seconds. That's taken me a long time, like a decade, to be very focused on that, and I'm still barely to what I would call an acceptable level, to where in comparison to, I could say this. I don't want to compare myself to anyone else. I want to compare myself to myself yesterday. And I can say that, yes, I'm a little bit better than I was yesterday. And I just want to keep on that trajectory when it comes to compartmentalizing feelings and emotions, especially in a time of crisis.
I think thank you. That was a great explanation and answer. That was really good. I enjoyed that.
Oh, good.
And,
Good.
and I think it's really good. The idea of better than yesterday, because it makes well, I ask myself, like, or I just say, the words better than yesterday quite often. I wouldn't say daily, even though that would make sense. But normally when I do something, I usually at the end of doing that, whether it's working out or creating content for the ScuttleButt Show, or doing something with my wife, or cooking, or doing something with my dog, I just usually can cap that off with better than yesterday. Like, this improved us and me and the whole situation better from yesterday. Now, when I remember when I was getting out of the Navy and then through THF and then meeting people, I noticed a lot of leadership embracing the mindfulness, embracing the meditation, the focused breathing, all the different schools of thought on how to like get that clarity, the mindfulness. Which I don't really know if mindfulness is a broad word, or if it started, because now it's a word thrown around for a lot of different things, or if it was started as kind of one specific thing, like somebody created the idea of mindfulness and they had a program, and then there's all these side, jut out programs, and now we just call them blanket mindfulness.
Right.
But anyway, what I'm getting at is, do you think is there an age where you can be too young to embrace mindfulness, where you just have to kind of go through some things personally before you can kind of get there? Do you feel like you've always had the ability to be mindful and embrace this Stoic philosophy that you've been reading about now? Or do you think, was there a time where it wasn't even possible and it's something you have to kind of embrace later?
Yeah. So the answer was, so hold on, there's a few questions in there. The first question is, have I always adopted mindfulness? The answer is unequivocally no. Um, have I always been mindful? Unequivocally no. Do you need to be a certain age to adopt this kind of understanding? Is the answer is no. It's never too late in life, too late in life, too early in life. What eventually drew me, I've read all of these books, almost the entirety of Marcus Aurelius's memoirs, not just the meditations, but like his full. Uh, well, I mean, it's hundreds of volumes, but let's just put it this way: I've read thousands of pages of his thoughts. It's well beyond meditations. And one thing that I thought that he taught me, if I could take all of those things and just from a matter of courage within himself, one, you ever hear the phrase like, it's not motivation gets you going, but habit gets you there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
all of those things, it's like the level of excellence that he showed to do something day in, day out. Like, what the point of meditations is, he just wrote every day. He just wrote something down and talked about it at length and picked things apart about why the world was the way the world was. And what, again, I wrote down, the top 20 things I wanted to focus on during quarantine. Obviously the first one was faith, the second was family, and then I went through this whole list of other things that I executed on in order for me to get the most out of what some folks are calling the great pause. When the world just stopped for a second and took a deep breath and just has been reminded how small, infinitely small we are when something like this happens. Like it takes man. Why does it take man so long to evolve to do anything? But when nature steps in, she does not give a flying, you know what, and it happens like that. Like all of a sudden, a century, bankers were never allowed to do anything outside of the halls of JP Morgan and Citigroup. And then all of a sudden, they had to reinvent the laws of trading so that traders could gasp, trade from home. Why? Like, why did it take a century for that to happen? And they wonder why the culture is deteriorating in Wall Street, and they're losing the talent battle to Silicon Valley because they've taken so long to adopt and adapt to the new generation that's coming out and how they prefer and choose to work. Um, so when it comes to mindfulness, you're right. I think things become kind of a clicky term or a fad. But it's like it's funny to me too, though, how there's been a resurgence even around Stoicism, thanks to Ryan Holiday and some of the books that he's published. And I'm gonna be speaking with him later this year, which I'm excited about. We have a lot to talk about. But it's funny how classical, like, how do you win championships? What's that classical phrase? Like, the fundamentals win championships, right? And even when I was a wrestler. When I watched the NCAA tournament for wrestling, here's what you see: you see single legs, you see double legs, you see reversals, you see escapes. The fundamentals, man, they just do them better than everyone else in the world. And I'm preparing a commencement speech for my old high school that I was going to give in May and then June, and now I'm doing it in August, and we're going to do it in person, and I'm excited about that. But one thing one point I'm going to weave into the greater story is when you go into college, I wish someone told me this. Despite what you land on doing, 80% of college graduates as of last year do not go into a field that has anything to do with their major. So my point to them, first off, would be don't get married to a major, get married to ideas. And when you do get to college, find ideas that excite you. And then I want you to trace, I want you to trace that idea back to the eye of the beholder and the person who had it. And I want you to pay attention to one thing: whoever the leader is in that space, I want you to pay attention how articulate they are and how well they can distill complex ideas simply. To me, that's brilliance. That's why they are known in the history books, because they were able to come up with a very simple idea to a very complex problem and then bring it to the world in a simple way. So when you go to college, don't focus on a major, focus on ideas and follow those ideas with all your heart. And then find the people in those idea lanes and find out what they're really good at. They're not just smart. There's a lot of smart people. There's not a lot of people willing to execute on ideas. And they did it well. And they did it because they knew how to talk about it. They had such a deep understanding and a passion for that work that they learned how to talk about it because they know the world needs things outlined in a certain way, in a certain framework for it to be digestible. Like when I watch Elon Musk, who's my gold standard of visionary in my generation, for me personally. Granted, whenever he talks, you notice that he's like looking up, like when he talks. For me, I joke that's him translating alien that he's receiving from the aliens, like through his brain, and then he computes that in a short cycle and then tells the world in plain English, like what he's going to do. But he does have a gift of explaining really complex things simply, especially when it comes to vision. So yes, mindfulness is timeless, but I also know that it's funny how things that are timeless and fundamental to being human seem to resurface when we're in crisis. That to me is what I think is interesting. And the fastest growing religion in this country, in the United States, is no religion. And then all of a sudden crisis happens and people are turning to faith. I'm an investor in a company, that is trying to build the digital platform for faith, democratizing faith in a sense. And oh my gosh, it's amazing how all of a sudden, right, quote unquote, out of nowhere, boom, they skyrocket in people that are signing up, people that are engaging. The engagement is what has really gone through the roof. And we look at what happened to us in a time where I felt, before pre-COVID, I felt the world was together alone, like we were all alone together. And now all of a sudden, it's almost like, okay, everyone go to your room, think about what you've done, and when we come back out, how much more? I mean, I get emotional even like saying this or thinking about this because Max, you know me personally and well enough to know how my heart feels about others and people. But like, how much more meaningful will it be to shake someone's hand? Like, how much more meaning will exist when you go to give someone a hug? And I think that that has been neglected for years, not to have that connection. And you value something. I'm not making some sort of like weird biblical, this is a plague, and like, oh, it's been written and so it was. Like, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that I just find it extremely historically coincidental um, that when we start underappreciating each other, the world corrects itself in some way through some event, and typically it's through nature. Um, that's what's happening here. I know I can't wait to get out there and hug people again. I mean, it took me 2 weeks for, people that were coming by the house, were redoing part of the house. That I go to shake their hand. I get to know them. I want to give them a little bro hug and a backpack. Like I can't, it's like, oh yeah, sorry about that. I forgot. Like it's always been my nature to bring people closer, not push people away. But the last, decade of since, post 2008, it's like we've gone into this, not just an economic recession after 2008, but we've gone into this kind of a human recession around emotion and exchanging that emotion and feeling for each other. And that is a big part of what it takes to be human.
So a couple things. That was really well stated, and I agree with you 100%. And let me start with the last thing that you said, which is when it comes to the shaking hands, giving hugs. I can't express how much I agree with you. And then the only thing I'll say is I hope that's the case for the majority of people.
Me too.
When I did an episode with a guy. He's an Army veteran. He's working in Hollywood now as a stuntman, and he lives in New York City. He lives in I think in the Bronx, and he said his hope is that as bad as people say they want to do things right now, they remember that feeling when they're able to. So, it's so easy. It would be so easy to slip back into old habits. But right now, when you get something taken away from you very abruptly, and you say, it's like having a near-death experience where you say, oh God, if I just make it through this, I'm going to change everything. But how easy is it to slip back and after a short amount of time, you forget all about that and you forget how much you appreciate life again, and you start whatever it is.
I totally agree. And there's one maxim that I live by religiously, like it's a religion, and I remind myself of it every day about the hope, the incremental change I hope to make every single day in my life to become a better version of myself today than yesterday. But I can tell you this, for most people, the pain. So for most people, real change will occur when the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of change. And for me, I know this is true in two areas of my life, almost identical 6 years apart from them happening to each other. The first one was I knew that I had to change directions in my life because I was physically injured and I had to discover a new way forward. And I had to leave a mindset that was in my brain for years since birth to be a part of a military community. And I knew that if I were to stay and this just from stories in the Navy, to let go of something like that and not keep trying to, circle back and spend years and trying to keep doing that. I knew that I was complete at this time, but I wasn't finished yet with my service. Boom, the Honor Foundation is born. But the pain, outweighed, of staying the same outweighed the pain of change. So I changed and course corrected. The next one came in 2017, where hardest time of my marriage ever, um, almost split. It was horrible. And I had to look at myself, and Marcus Aurelius talks about this a lot, that there's a moment in every man's life, and I'm sure it's true for women as well. There's a moment. Well, actually, no, I take that back. He was being very directed about this happens in a man's life, because women are actually born far more mature than men, and they continue to be more mature to men for many, 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 many years. And what he talked about was there's a moment in a man's life where he stops becoming a boy and becomes a man for good. Like there's a tilting point where he can never go back to that boy ever again, ever, even if he tried, and it can't be explained. It's like a season pivot point in a life, and it's typically around some sort of, I don't want to say traumatic event, but again, change occurs when the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of change. In 2017, for me, that was my moment. And it happened later in my life than I think that it happens to most people. And not most people, I should say military folks, because I feel like military people have a different type of maturity because they've seen and done very real things much sooner than everyone else. And they can't be the 19-year-old boy they were, because they're off to Fallujah tomorrow, or they've got men they have to look after at 24 as a new officer, and there's lives at stake. The bottom line for business is dollars. The bottom line for military are lives. I need to mature faster. For me, it was 2017. I never could go back to who I was after that year, because the pain of staying the same outweighed the pain of change, no question. And although I couldn't explain it to Hannah, I was like, trust me, this will never happen in any type of way. We'll never experience anything like this again, because it's done. Like I can't explain it. I can't even put myself in that mindset, like looking myself like a snake, like thinking back and like playing through all of that in my mind. I look at that person now like a stranger. I don't even know what was kind of going through that stranger's mind, because it wasn't me, or at least it's not me now. So anyways, to your point, I sure do hope that people understand and internalize this pain. And my real fear is the generation where this is impacting the most, the people that are, the little ones that are between the ages of like 7 and 12, where all of a sudden they're told not to be a kid, or not to be kid-like anymore. Protect yourself. Don't hug, don't touch. We have to protect grandma and grandpa. Oh my God, well, from what? Like, imagine COVID from a childlike perspective. It's like the boogeyman. They don't know what it is. They don't quite understand it. And I hope it doesn't have some sort of lasting effect on their ability to then kind of increase the nurture gene inside of them 10 years from now. Ages 0 to 10 are the most influential years for nature and nurture and all the things that matter to humans. My worry is that this will have a carried over effect. And I had a virologist and a very well-known doctor argue with me on this, saying that, well, there were people in 2008. I'm like, this is not 2008. This is incomparable to 2008. This was that was a market crash due to decades of irresponsible behavior. This is a virus. Yes, most likely we will find out due to irresponsible behavior. But at the same time, it's very different. It's very different. The kids don't necessarily get scared of the big bad market crash. They get scared when they're told to stay in their house for 55 days, not talk to anyone, and we're worried about grandma and grandpa, so we're not going to see them for a while. That's different.
Yeah. So actually, I have something I'll say about that. A couple things, actually. Really quick. I want to get this thought out before I forget. Is I forgot for a minute, and it came back, and I want to get out before it happens again.
Good.
Something you said earlier. You were saying you were starting to talk about when you listen to people speak, the leaders in the fields and how articulate they are. Before you said it, when you said how articulate they are, the word in my head was simple, because they make it sound so simple. And you can tell when you're talking to somebody if they're speaking from either a place of complete expertise or lived experience or some kind of combination of the two.
Yep.
To them, everything in that subject is so simple.
That's right.
They can express it so simply. You ask them what you think is like the most clever, intelligent question you could ever imagine, and they go, "Oh, it's simple. It's here it is. It's simple," because they just see it that way. And it was funny that you said that right afterwards, because that's exactly what I thought too. And it's if you observe people who are experts, leaders, when they're talking about something, they just say it, and it makes so much sense, and it seems so simple from their perspective.
That's right. I've gone to the level of, like, I created a very specific definition of brilliance, and it's hold on, let me just put it together in my head before I say it. It's a man or woman who can see the world from multiple angles in space and time and articulate that perspective with accuracy. And that last part's really important to me. Who can see the world from multiple angles in time and space and articulate that perspective with accuracy. Meaning they can automatically, like, one of my co-investors is like this. He must be, I mean, he's brilliant. Number one, he is a brilliant, and I think he is a genius by societal definition of a genius, but his recall is unbelievable. I mean, like, walking me through, he may not have been there in the 17th century and the 18th century and the 19th century when different flus and pandemics and things broke out around the world, but he sure as hell spoke to me like he was. And the ability to see the world, that's why I use that term, multiple angles of both time and space, like, meaning the space that we are occupying right now, you in Japan, me in the United States and Southern California, were completely different in 1805. Like, so that's what I mean by time and space, and learning about the world as it evolves in time and space, and how space evolves over time. That is such a cross mapping gift and again, back to shortening the time to react. Having a grip on history to that degree is very difficult, and it belongs to the mind of a genius to be able to do that with accuracy. Not just out of my ass, but like literally with accuracy. But yes, it's brilliance is simple.
Yeah. Isn't it isn't the fundamental idea of a brilliant idea that you've broken it down further than it can be broken down? Like, you break something down, it can't be broken down any further. You've gotten to the base of the problem and found the core and found the true problem and the true solution. And it's usually very simple.
That's right. It's funny. This would be a good segue to start talking about Fathom too, by the way.
Okay. Yeah. I'm ready. It's just, we got talking about, these other ideas, and you have a lot of great perspective. And so it's just a really easy conversation we got ourselves into.
No, this is, dude, take a page out of Joe Rogan, right? Like, just go where it goes, no matter how long. And the only reason why I said to transition to Fathom, because what you just said is a big part, getting to the core, right? The reason why we called it Fathom is because everything that matters is beneath the surface. Everything. Like, what matters most in a human body are the organs, and they are deep within, right? Down to the cells that make up your body. Like, the thing that's fighting off through, it builds our immunity deep within, and their role is critical. So when I thought about what I learned at the Honor Foundation, was that the most instinctive, what I would argue, the most sentient and instinctive community in the world, what they kept telling me, meaning the special operations community, what they kept telling me in their state of mind around transition is, I kept hearing the same thing. I just want to be a part of a great team. I want a great leader, and I want to be a part of a great culture. And I kept hearing it over and over again. And this was in 2012, 13, when I was doing all the interviews, 250 operators in 7 states in 6 months. I kept hearing the same thing, which then led us to do the treks, right? And the treks, for the listeners that don't know what a trek is, at the Honor Foundation, we basically parachute into a city, not literally, metaphorically, and we go visit multiple companies, not for the purpose to get our fellows jobs, although jobs do happen as a result of the trek. That's not the core purpose behind treks. It's to show a stark and distinct difference among cultures, where we could take them into an Amazon, and then we go across the street to a startup with 11 people operating out of 1,000 square feet, and bring them back and forth and back and forth and up and down and all around the different types of cultures you can see in a 3-day trip. 10, 15 companies in 3 days. It's nonstop. They love it. It's high energy, and you get to meet amazing people. What I learned from the Trek experience throughout THF, which was it's where the idea and the genesis started about the 5 forces. And the 5 forces is something I'm working on. I'm writing a book on it. I'll be done by the end of next year. But the 5 forces are super important. And every business, small and big, has these 5 forces working either against them or for them at any given time. And when we go into these different companies, I would see on the wall, I would see plaques, I would see banners, I would see on their website, I would see things that are reminiscent to these 5 things: vision, mission, core values, guiding principles, and ethos. Every company has these. And in your mind, as you're listening to me outline these 5 forces, imagine vision is someone planting a flag on the top of an iceberg. And on top of the iceberg, that's what the whole world sees. That's what's visible. It's what's above the surface, right? And to give you an idea of a vision statement, it's the way I describe. Pardon me. The way that I define. Sorry, not describe, but the way that I define vision is just pretty simple. It's the world we envision and hope to achieve together. It's pretty simple. And again, that's open for the whole world to see, the flag on the top. If you go down just kind of beneath at the surface, that's what I see mission. You see mission all the time on all different types of slides and walls and you name it, and you'll see it, right? And so, like, for instance, my mission, my personal mission, is to light fires so others may see. That's what gets me out of bed every single morning. So when we went to these companies, I began to see, like, okay, the vision's here, the mission's here. And then, of course, we have the very classical core values, right? We see these things all the time on every wall of every website, no matter what it is. You'll see people talking about, core values, core values, core values. And when I think about from a core value perspective, it's like, for me, core values are pretty simply defined. It's our moral compass, right? It's our internal moral compass. It's what's driving the organization. If you're a Catholic, you think of the 10 Commandments. Those are core values, all right? If I were to ask a room filled with Catholics, how many of these commandments have you broken? Every Catholic would raise their hand and say, I've broken a commandment, because it's a moral compass. It's something we're trying to get to. It's like a moral platitude. Like, for me, again, be you is a core value of mine. I go through days multiple times every day, not being myself and not being true to who I really want to be, or being unoriginal outside of myself. So that's a core value that I try to reach for every day. Practicing artistry, a value of mine. It's a sliding scale. There's days where I'm at a 9, there's days where I'm at a 2, and I'm just a lazy piece of shit. And the goal is to have the average of that be where you are tilting to the right. You're tilting to practicing artistry. But again, like the commandments, we're just trying to get to those things, that moral compass. Now, this is where it gets interesting. When I started to do these treks, and I had a top-down approach, a top-down sales method, if you will. Meaning that I would get the Honor Foundation access by talking to the CEO, and only the CEO, and then the CEO would then make it a priority, push down into the organization to help us gain access to the right people, so that everyone kind of made it a priority for the Honor Foundation to see them. And with that being the case, I then started to work with other people throughout the organization, which means I was going deeper into the iceberg, right? So I got the pitch from the CEO, man, the vision's aligned, the mission's aligned, the core values are aligned. Then I got into the organization and they're like, hey, let me, tell me about the vision here. Something totally different from what the CEO said. What's the mission here? Something totally different than what the leadership said. And then, hey, what are the values? Yeah, they're here, but man, the eye roll, right? Like, it's kind of a joke. And yeah, we proclaim this and da 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 da. And then I realized, okay, there's some misalignment here. Like the deeper you go in the iceberg, you realize that there's some real cultural misalignment. And you do that for 5 to 7 years. You see hundreds of companies. You speak to thousands of people. I've spoken to thousands of people, and then I became obsessed with startup culture. And I realized if there is one time when these types of alignment conversations have to happen, they have to happen at the earliest stages of the company. Every Fortune 500 company was once a startup. Somewhere along the road, they became misaligned. And I haven't met with, there's very few people, I shouldn't say blanket statement, but there's very few people that I've met with in large organizations who feel like the organization is completely aligned, up, down, and all around, like completely aligned. I've met with some companies that are, and man, are they successful. And not just are they successful, their employees are fulfilled. And when I make the joke that, tell me a company in Silicon Valley that's 100 years old. You can't. So like, we don't know if Facebook's going to be here 10 years from now. We don't know if Yahoo will be around much longer. We don't know if Intel is going to continue to be the leader. We don't know these things because there's no history to show us. And those are the longer standing companies, but no company in Silicon Valley has a 100-year track record, where there are hundreds of companies in the United States with a 100+ year track record. And when I found the most exceptional one, what I found was complete alignment, up, down, and all around. I walked into this organization to do an interview for my book, and I couldn't quite make out what was being sung in the other room. It sounded like a happy birthday, but it wasn't a happy birthday song. People were clapping. And I asked the CEO, I said, what's going on in there? Oh, we're celebrating Nancy's 50th work anniversary. And I was like, I'm sorry, come again. Like, did you say you're celebrating Nancy's 50th work anniversary? Oh, we were the first job she had out of college. She didn't leave. She became a VP, a global VP. We love her. She loves us. Oh, we're going to be so sad. She came in specifically to celebrate today. She kind of has her corner office and comes and goes as she pleases. And, because she's 74 years old, right? And she's still coming back because it meant that much to her. And there are companies in Silicon Valley that are not 50 years yet, but do have the making of being a great company like that if they remain aligned. The only thing that kills alignment is an improper scale. And an improper scale is when the CEO and the management team begin to lose sight of the founding vision, of that founding mission, of the core values they set from the beginning, and then guiding principles, meaning the founder and the founding team are leaving behind clues and breadcrumbs as to how they would make decisions. And they're writing down things in a very tactical way based on the truths they know within that company. And the ethos can only be created. Think of the ethos as the bottom part of that iceberg. It's where the bulk of the iceberg lives. And we don't know what the ethos, it took the Spartans nearly 300 years to develop their ethos. And once they designed and developed the ethos, I challenge all the listeners, go and Google the Spartan ethos. And you tell me, after you read that the Spartans were not crystal clear on who they are. And that is the point. When I think of ethos, what it's supposed to be is the about us, right? And when you go to an about us page of a website, this is what you see. In 1960, someone invented something. In 1970, we grew. In 1980, we're in 5 countries. In 1990, we were bought. In 2000, we grew even more. In 2010, we hired this unbelievable person, this new CEO. And now in 2020, we're experiencing unbelievable, unprecedented, unlike any other thing the world has ever seen type of growth. And we've built this amazing vision and mission, and we have these core values that we find like, and I finished the About Us page, and I don't know anything about who they are. That is what the point of these 5 forces is about. And I can tell within an instant after these interviews whether a company is aligned or misaligned. And when we think about an ethos, think of like this, the Navy SEAL ethos. After you read that SEAL ethos, you know who they are. They're an uncommon breed, right? That's, you read through that and you can feel through the words that those words are the ones that resonate with the population. So why are the 5 forces important? Well, think about it. If you start up as a startup moving into the world, and imagine if you are aligned and everyone in the organization, those 5 people that are starting a big business, they're all aligned. What's that going to impact? All the job descriptions that they write that go out into the world will convey who they are and what they hope to achieve, how they plan to get there, why they exist in the world, why they're getting out of bed every single morning. So what's that going to do? Do you think like the SEAL ethos and the Spartan ethos, did that attract the wrong people to the mission? Or did it attract the right people to the mission? Because the core values resonated with them inside. The mission is one they'd want to get out of bed for. The vision, the world that they envision and hope to achieve together, that's something, it's a calling, it's not a career. That's why alignment matters. That's why Fathom needed to be created, because there was not, and the best part about the 5 forces, they're just the prequel. They're the preface to the real meat and potatoes of what needs to happen, which are the TLC. Teams, leadership, and culture. You can't have great teams, leadership, and culture that are attracted to your organization unless you are in alignment with those 5 things. You will not attract it to you because you're misaligned. So you'll get misaligned people, which is bad for everyone. No one wanted to apply for a job that they weren't a good fit for, and no one wanted to hire someone for a job that they weren't a fit for. So it's all about alignment. And I know this from a personal journey. We all have these 5 forces in us. It's how I created the foundation. And then I left the foundation, really honed in my own 5 forces. Every word resonates with me now, and I'll continue to keep doing it. And then I created another 5 forces and then attracted new teammates, which then led to great TLC in our fund and into our companies, and now hopefully out into the world.
Where do I begin? Because that was a lot of really. Let me start here. That was all from a perspective of what you've learned since you've started venture capital. Is that true, or does that go back to? Have those ideas been something that you knew when you started? THF, like you knew it in your gut is what I mean. Like you might not have put it on paper, but you kind of knew those things to be true. Or did you learn them in college? Or did you learn them when you were doing work overseas as a civilian? Or did you learn them in buds? Or did you learn them in venture capital? Like where did these ideas become clear for you?
Yeah, man, that's a great question.
Because sometimes you know it in your gut and you act on things and they're the right things, but you haven't been able to put them in words yet. Their instincts, their feelings,
Matt,
their guttural.
I am totally tracking that question. The problem is it's so hard to think of. So I've mentioned a bunch of times, first off, that I have hundreds of co-founders with the foundation. Like I didn't do any of that by myself. I have hundreds of co-founders in Fathom. I didn't do any of that myself, because how do you begin to distribute credit when the last 20 years of my life, from leaving, I'd say in high school, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was more concerned about the approval of others and being like others versus being and understanding myself. And that's taken a long time to just begin to reflect on and be proud and courageous in who I am and be authentic to myself about being myself. That was a journey in itself. The moment of clarity happened when I started to write a lot. And when I left the Honor Foundation, at that kind of, uh, I shouldn't say I left, I shifted onto the board. Um, but it gave me some deep, quiet time for nearly a year. And that's when I began to do what I love again. And so this goes back to what we preach at the Honor Foundation. What would you do? What do you do when you lose track of time? Just like we're doing right now, I lose track of time when I'm having a meaningful conversation with someone I know, love, and respect. I don't even know where the day goes. I could spend, if you were at my house right now, we would have started at noon, we would have finished at 2. You would have crashed because you would have crashed at my house because we would have had a bottle of bourbon, and then it would have went in all different types of directions, and we would have had a wonderful time, and we wouldn't even know where the day went. Um, so when I really pinpointed on a map, what was it about the Honor Foundation that brought me so much joy and happiness and fulfillment? And I drew it on a whiteboard, then I drew it on a map, then I made the map into a slide deck, and then I looked at the slide deck and added to it, and it became this deep, 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 deep dive into the true reasons why the Honor Foundation fulfilled me so much. And in brief and in summary, I would say that it had a lot to do with I felt so insecure not being able to make it through training without injury that I wanted to prove myself. I had just the perfect amount of chip on my shoulder that I still had something to prove to the community. I wanted to show them that I was worthy. And then out of those initial kind of selfish reasons came all the other reasons that I became addicted to, like devoting all of myself to a family to make sure they have a job, devoting all of my resources, my network, my energy, my enthusiasms, my conversations, everything to ensure that this greater mission could impact tens of thousands of operators all over the country forever. And I became very tactical and technical and surgical about what gave me ultimate fulfillment. And so really, when people ask me now, how did you go from being a non-profiteer to a venture capitalist or a vulture capitalist or whatever it might be, they're looking at it completely wrong. The work and the fulfillment avenue and pathway is the same. I started THF by doing 250 interviews to the community I wanted to serve, to deeply understand a problem. I interviewed 151 Fortune 500 companies to better understand the problem, interviewed 36 non-profiteers in the veteran space to better understand a problem. Complex problem, and then yet when I talk about it, I can talk about the solution very simply. Go ahead.
No, go.
So going into Fathom, after I outlined all my strengths, all my weaknesses, what brought me joy, what made me feel fulfilled, because what I've realized, I'm a God-fearing man. So to throw that out there, I know that my gifts, talents, skills, and abilities are on lease. And I'm not doing him justice if I'm not doing all that I can to bring all that I am into the world, because I was given these abilities. Every time I neglect a skill set or a discipline, it's not just neglecting me, myself, my family, but ultimately God. And I don't, obviously, that's not something I try to do on a daily basis. The bringing Fathom into this work, it's like, okay, I started THF after doing tons of personal interviews, and then I created something, and I started with devoting group 1, right? 20 SEALs, 10 enlisted, 10 senior officers, 10 senior enlisted. And I devoted all of myself, all of my resources, all of my network, all of my energy, all my enthusiasm and creativity to those 20 people. Flash forward through the 5-year Honor Foundation experience, going back to my roots. It's not roots, it's what brings me joy and fulfillment in life. I went back and interviewed 50 founders between the A and B round of funding. I went back and interviewed 50 VCs who fund the A to B rounds. I asked them about each other. I heard them talk about one another. I discovered a very deep systemic problem from founders to VCs, and I wanted to fix and solve that. Then what happened? Well, our portfolio will have 25, maybe 35 companies. I'm going to devote all of myself, all of my resources, all of my energies, all my enthusiasms to those 25 companies. And now The 20 SEALs that I helped out and group one, now we're on group like 32. We're going to hit
That's
a
so
thousand
awesome. That's
families.
so
It's
awesome.
crazy, right?
Yeah,
It's
it's
crazy.
awesome.
We're going to hit 1,000 families this year. And like, imagine if we were to mind map the impact those 1,000 operators and families will have in the world. Like it would be in the tens of millions, if not the hundreds of millions, right? Of
Yep.
lives that those people will go on to touch.
Yep.
I am hungry for impact. So therefore, let's see what type of great impact we can make now with 25 to 35 entrepreneurs who are going to be responsible for hiring tens of thousands of people whose products will impact 1 billion plus lives. All right, now we're talking. Like, I think that's worthy. I think that's worthy of a shift. I think that's worthy of saying, my job here is complete, not finished. I'm going to support THF. I'm going to raise an endowment. Now I'm going to go start this next chapter. I'm going to start Fathom Ventures, which focuses on what's beneath the surface for companies. Because I had every founder tell me the same thing, Max, which was when I talked about alignment of vision, mission, core values, guiding principles, and who is like the cultural steward to bring the five forces into great teams, great leadership, and great culture. I don't have time for that right now. We got to scale. I'm expected to raise more money. I'm expected to grow the team. I'm expected to go international. I'm expected to fill in the blank, and then after the blank as fast as possible. So if I could be like this little monkish kind of figure in these companies, and all I do is listen, and if all I get to do is listen, I'm going to hear things they may not hear. And then I could pose it back to them in the form of a question and help them keep and stay aligned, true and pure to the founder's initial vision, mission, core values, help them develop guiding principles into their ethos to then go out and attract great teams, great leadership, and great culture to then scale and grow.
So, it's funny because before you ever talked about writing, I was going to ask you almost jokingly, so when's the book coming out? Because it would be criminal for you to not write down your experiences and everything you've learned. So when you said that, I was elated. I can't wait for that day to come. And just starting with that, the five principles.
Forces, yeah.
Forces, and principles is one of them. That you are going to impact so many people just with that, because it makes so much sense and it's so simple. And that ties back into when you talk to somebody who's really in tune with what they're doing, they can make it sound really simple because they've broken it down in a very simple way. And it's funny because leading up to this, I had a question I wanted to ask you, even though it's almost like the answer is obvious. Maybe to me, I think it will be to you, but maybe to some people it's not. But I'd just love to hear where you go with this question, which is I feel like there's a lot of businesses now starting out that are very image focused, that are trying to match an image that they've seen. And let's just say, here's the hypothetical is, we want to be like, when it comes to culture, we want to be like Apple or Google. When you walk into our office, we want that kind of environment. But those businesses started in a garage, and I think if you're not willing to start with nothing, you don't deserve. You haven't earned something like a campus, or like when you walk into.
If you're not willing to start with nothing, you're entitled to absolutely nothing.
So. Okay, so if you're not willing to start with nothing, you're not entitled to anything.
Anything, that's right.
And where exactly, basically, what I thought your perspective would be on that. But now, what do you, from your perspective now with Fathom, what do you see if you were walking into a business that was either a little overdone on the front end, or B, a garage? Or do you have any anecdotal stories of one or the other, or both?
I do. So on the overdone side, I mean, it's so funny in the short amount of time. This goes back to everyone that's listening. Um, I would invest in a gritty A+ team with a B- idea every day of the week, every day of the week, because the team will make it a success no matter what. I will not invest in a B- team um, with an A+ idea. It won't. It won't. It really won't happen because it's about the long game, and that's what I'm learning more about. And even the space that I chose to go into is more about long return versus short gains. And that in itself, if you knew me 15 years ago, 20 years ago, um, I was in a very different mindful state of short returns, forget the long gains. The right now, not necessarily the right decision, which I think comes with youth, and I think it comes with you grow out of it with experience. But um, what I can say is that talent is everything. But this is what I mean by talent. Talent is everywhere. Like there's a lot of talented people in the world. There's a lot of talented people and smart people in Silicon Valley. There's a lot of talented people in Silicon Valley. There's not a lot of talented people willing to sweep the floor. So let's talk about why I say that, because one of our values at Fathom, and we only have 4. I know that sounds like a weird arbitrary number, but we're not going to create values that we don't necessarily need to. Um, but one of our values, and values are verbs, they have to be verbs. One of our values is sweep with a period. And sweep means when we walk into a place or when we meet with a founder, um, does he or she seem like someone that's really willing to put in some work? I'm talking about feeling no difference about closing shops, sweeping up, taking garbage out, to making executive decisions at the highest level, and their attitude will never change up and down the chain. It doesn't matter. They're willing to do any and every job, and they'll continue to do that no matter what. Sometimes lots of forward-facing polish is indicative of other things. What are you trying to draw my attention away from? And I'm not saying that that's the case in all of these scenarios. I'm saying that in the earliest stages of a company, typically funding and resources are so rare and nimble that it gives me an idea of how you're allocating your time, your talent, your treasure. Um, and again, it's so instinctual, and I'm still so young at this and building up scar tissue every day to help me make more informed decisions by learning from the people that I trust, know, and love inside of the space to give me honest feedback. But there's so much to be said to the question that you just came up with, because um, there's a fun, I love those. I do a lot of master classes. I think they're brilliant. The founder's out of Stanford. He does a phenomenal job at capturing people in their space and time and ideas. And Steve Martin did one, and I watched Steve Martin because I think early SNL days. I think he's a brilliant comedian, and he said that he was teaching a bunch of young people about comedy, and someone asked him about like headshots and social media and websites, my personal branded website, all this stuff, and he kind of just said, you know, don't you, the first thing you want to do, isn't it to be good? And I laughed just like you did. I was like, man, there's so much like simple wisdom in that. What brings all of that stuff into the world is the fact that you are good at what you do. And the rest of that kind of follows along with it in balance. So to your question about like, where's that the balance of like, we're trying to be like, if you're trying to be like Apple and Google, then you'll never be you because you're trying to be like them, number one. And if you have an original product or idea, it'll begin to throw its talons into the world and draw people closer to it. What I look for is alignment. I want to know that the team is aligned, that I could go to the janitor of the building, to the lowest, to the front desk person, to the CEO, and they will all tell me the same story. That's what I want to hear. It's that classic JFK analogy, right? Or the anecdote of JFK going to visit NASA. Have you ever heard this?
I think you told this last time you were on the podcast. But
Okay, well, I won't repeat it.
if you want to repeat it, it's I know what you're gonna, I know it. But if you want to repeat it, I love it, and please do, in case I'm misremembering.
I'll be brief. It's a perfect example of alignment. And we
It's
all know what
great
happened
quote.
to NASA in the 1960s. Okay, JFK inauguration says we're going to the moon, right? We're going to the moon. Awesome. Funding, attention, energy, enthusiasm flowed into NASA, and they were motivated. They were going to put a human being, on the moon. This was a big deal. And as we see now, even last week, it's going to be a big deal again, right? On how far we've come. So JFK walks into NASA, as the story goes, with his entourage, and he's coming to do like his rounds, and he sees a janitor, and the janitor kind of humbly lowers his head and steps to the side, thinking he's just going to walk past him. But in a very JFK moment, he stopped and he wanted to talk to the janitor and shook his hand and said, what do you do here, sir? And he goes, with this kind of questionable, snarky look on his face, like, sir, we're going to the moon. Like, just like that, right? To the president of the United States. And when I think of why Elon Musk is my gold standard for vision of the 5 principles, or the 5 forces that I'll outline in the book, is when you walk into SpaceX, they're there for one reason: occupy Mars. That's it. That's what gets them out of bed every single day. And in some businesses, you'll see that a force is stronger than the other 4. And in their case, the vision is carrying that company, because he has all over the walls. It's incredible. He has like the commune of what Mars will look like in a giant poster. He has Teslas rolling around on the surface because that's what it's going to look like. He's taken the vision out of his mind and he's made it a reality for people who may not have vision. They might be executors. They might be quants. They might not be quals. They might be live. They might be realists and not visionaries. It doesn't matter. When you have that strong of a vision, you need to get it out of your mind and you have to draw people to it. And that's why they have unbelievably high retention at that organization. People think there's high attrition. It's, if anything, there's burnout. It doesn't have anything to do with people quitting or leaving. It's they're working so damn hard for so damn long on something that is still, millions of miles away. Anyways, so that's what I would say about the 2 different types of startups that you brought up. The early stage gritty. I'm talking to a founder in his living room, and went remote immediately because he wanted to save as much money. He did not want to fire a single person, to the person who remained in the office to continue doing the podcasts, to get out to the world and the videos and the photog. And he didn't care about letting go half the staff so he could keep up the brand. He wanted to show brand consistency throughout the COVID crisis. And by the way, I don't know if either one is right or wrong, but for some reason, my gut says go with the guy that's working out of his living room, where I can hear his wife and his 3 kids running around in the background, who didn't want to fire a single person because he's hired all true believers. I want something like that in my portfolio. I want a person like that leading the charge of true believers versus someone where he thinks people are disposable. Like, what if every founder treated their organization in the earliest days like employees were family? As much as some of us would like, we'd love to fire a family member every now and then, right? You're fired, you're done. I don't want anything to do with you anymore. But we don't, right? We continue to love them and coach them or mentor them and try to bring them up responsibly. And in the early days, it just doesn't work like that. When you find a core team that is that in line with each other, man, you fight for it. And I felt that in him. Fighting for his people. And that's very convincing for me.
I'm so glad that you said that you did tell that story. And honestly, I'm a little emotional right now because, well, for one, hearing it with your enthusiasm is inspiring. And then 2, the way you said it right now made me think of it in a way I've never thought about it before, which specifically about JFK asking the janitor what he does there. Which what I thought this time, as you were saying it, was how beautiful of a thing it is to give someone to inspire someone like that and to give them so much purpose, is there's nothing to compare to it in the world. And the idea that, and now I'm extrapolating that a little bit into, you know, what I would hope would be true, what I believe is true, is that then on the day that NASA lands on the moon, the janitors and the engineers and the admins can give each other a hug, and the mechanics, and they can celebrate those wins together. And, you know, I even the hair on my arm standing up.
I got goosebumps too, man. I got literal goosebumps.
Yeah,
look at those.
Yeah, I see it.
Literal goosebumps.
Yeah, there's nothing like, and it reminds me of the greatest victories we've shared in the military. When you have a team that's clicking like that and everyone believes in what they're doing, it's you know what? Anything else you could? There's no reason you wouldn't have to say anything else about why you do what you do, because you made it clear right there, because that is all I could, for me, just speaking personally, is all I could ever hope to ask for, is that you've had some hand in inspiring that kind of greatness in someone's life that they can get from that. I mean, nothing else compares. So
could not agree more.
I am so glad that you went and said that, because I had never thought about it from this perspective. I had never blown up the picture a little bit more from that, and really thought about what that means to me. Because it makes sense on the surface, but when I think about it a little further, when I string it out a little more into the future of what that must have been like for them, the dream would be to be a part of a team like that again.
That's right.
At some point in my life. If I'm ever lucky enough. And I might have told you this last time, but and if you only get it once in your life, then you're lucky you got it.
That's right.
For some people, it'll never happen.
That's right. Yep.
It reminds me of when I was getting out of the Navy. When I knew I was getting out of the Navy, our OIC was getting ready to retire, and I used to go to work really early in the morning because I love early mornings. Like, my favorite time of the day is early in the morning before anybody else is up. It's just something magical about that pre-dawn. No one's out. Your day is totally yours at this point. You're getting a head start, and you're getting ready before anybody else. It's like, it's the best. But I would go to work really early. He would come in pretty early too, usually shortly after I did. And he had, kids and a family, and I was cruising at like 4:30 a.m. And just start doing stuff, either like personal, whatever. I was just there. Anyway, he comes in early one day, and he knew I was getting out, and he said, Max, this is the whole conversation. He walks in, and he's going in to get, his hard drive out of the safe. And he says, Max, do you think you'll ever work with another group of people this great? And I said, I know I won't, and that's right. Fine. That's fine, because I'm so lucky I got to now. If I ever thought I worked with a team of people this great again, it would totally confuse me, because I can't imagine that feeling, of coming into a place where I believed in the team and felt more a part of things, willing to do anything, go anywhere, follow these people, and they follow me around the world, into the unknown. Is just amazing. Anyway, I'm inspired now talking to you about this, and it's amazing to hear you talk about it. As far as VC goes,
that makes me feel so good. And here's so when I found my personal vision, so like I said, we're all walking around. I've said this multiple times. When everyone is walking around a bundle of stories, and back to you, like you asked, that moment of clarity. The deeper you go, and this gets me very emotional, because it surfaces everything that matters to me in my life, because it's the things that matter to us in our life that actually help course correct our life. It's whether or not we're willing to take the journey to do a deep dive and look within. And what I mean by that is, when you go to the darkest places inside of you, you'll find something that shines. And it's that thing that shines that you then can take out of the darkness with you, but you only are able to see it unless you go in deep. Like, that's the point. So the journey is the deep dive. And as you go deeper and deeper, you start to notice these things that it may have looked like a piece of coal or volcanic rock. And then all of a sudden you notice that some of that, because you've looked at it as some sort of negative thing in your life for decades, or negative shaping, or you ignored it, you've compartmentalized and tucked it away, and you haven't reopened it to re-examine it because you're in a new season in life and you can handle it differently. That's something we forget, that it might be traumatic in our childhood, but now we've grown. I want to go back. I want to attack it. I want to figure out what it is. I want to know why I felt that way. I never want to have these types of feelings again. You write it down, you map it, you graph it, you find the shiny things, and you realize that so much of what will direct us is actually, it's inside of us already. And only until we try to go through an excavation of those 5 forces, like my vision is very clear for the rest of my life. I'll hone it, I'll design it, but I can see the world I hope to create and envision. And I envision a world where people feel psychologically safe and compensated doing work that they know and love and feel fulfilled. That is like my dream. That's it. That's my vision for the world. How am I going to do that? Well, my mission is very simple. It's to light fires so others may see, because I want them to get into that work, to get into that vision. The world, imagine the world where everyone felt psychologically safe and compensated doing work they love. Imagine that vision of a world, how it would just change everything, right? And here's the anger factor I have and the drive with the Honor Foundation is I honestly believe that no one in the world deserves to have a path lit through the darkness to find the light and the shiny things than the members of the special operations community. They have the deepest and darkest places. So therefore, they need support to help navigate that dark path. Once they navigate the path, they find the shiny things, brush the dirt off and the ash and the volcanic rock and the things that they thought were stains and blemishes and problems and embarrassing moments, and they open it back up and realize there's something there to be polished. There's diamonds there. And then when they graduate, it's like if we only brought them to the point where they no longer fear what's next, we win. It's not about a job. It's not about a career. It's about getting them to that point where they are fearless once again. And I tear up as I even tell this story because like I gained clarity on how to create the foundation through my own inner struggle and from a failure and from the worst moment of my life. And I was depressed and I was anxiety driven and I was embarrassed. And instead of like trying to just go back home and tuck tail it, I was like, there's no way. I need to like dive into this. And so the process naturally evolved out of that failure and of not becoming a SEAL. Only because of that failure did something shiny come out of that. When I retraced all those steps and went deep again and asked myself deeper questions, I'd come out of, the office and Hannah would notice this look on my face, my wife, and she would say, she'd joke because I had been doing this for just literally months and months and months and months. She would go, did you find out something else about yourself again? Like, I'm like, yep, I sure did. And let me tell you about it. Like, this is what I found today. That the reason why this happened is because when I was this age, I did this and I was blah, 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 going all the way through. And this is why I act this way. And then I called family to confirm. They said, yes, that's exactly what happened. I was like, oh my God. Then it's like another eureka moment. We write it down. We add it to the deck. We build the journey. So I know for a fact that people can, in fact, find what's next for them if they're willing to do the work. And it's inner work. It has nothing to do with outer work. It has nothing to do with, I need to know someone who knows someone who can get me into the company. It has nothing to do with that. What do you even plan to bring to the company? Especially if you don't even know who you are. That's the deepest and darkest thing. Like, here's a question that, for the audience. And, when I think about this question, if somebody were to ask me this the wrong way, with the wrong tone 3 years ago, like fisticuffs, right? And think about this. What would any of us feel if somebody walked up to us and said, who do you think you are? Like, we'd have an emotional reaction to that, right? I would have. Now I'm in this state of mind where if somebody were to ask that to me in any tone, I'd be like, God, I'm still working on that. Like, I don't know. I know some things, like be wary of the man who seems certain. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
Like, for me, like if somebody came up to me, who do you think you are? Dude, I have no idea, man. I know kind of what I love and who I love and why I love them. But man, I'm working on that. I think I'm this way, but I'm certainly not certain. I'm not certain as to who I am. And then the aggressor who asked that would probably be like, yo, dude, I was just trying to pick some shit. I wasn't trying to get all existential right now. Like, no, but at the same time, I wouldn't feel anything for the first time in my life if somebody rolled up into my face and said, who do you think you are? I'd be like, dude, I don't know. That's a really good question. How much time do you have? And I guess that also goes into the same thing where when I ask this question to entrepreneurs, like, who do you think you are? It's one of the first questions that when I get the one-on-one time, when it presents itself to be the right moment to have the one-on-one meeting, because they need, just as THF, they need to be ready to receive these types of things. Otherwise, it's just going to fall on deaf ears. So when I say, like, who do you think you are? And then the next question I ask about, I fill in some context around like the world and your team and like, who do they think you are? Because sometimes those things do not align. Who you think, Max, who you think you are. And then you ask yourself, well, who do they think you are? Meeting the world right there, that causes like, oh man, is it in alignment? Does the world see me as I see myself into the world? And the most important question is, how ignorant are you to who you could become? That to me is the deepest question that scares the shit out of any person who thinks deeply at all about themselves. How ignorant are you being to who you could actually become? That's frightening.
Yeah. So, okay, let me start here. You've, ever since I met you in 2017, and I'm sure you've come up with this before that, you've had the same mission, which is light fire so others can see. And I thought I understood. I kind of understood it, but now I really do. Better than I ever have before with the way you just put it. Was beautiful.
When you met me before, I wasn't as clear. And now remember the first why mission that I had was the mission of the Honor Foundation, to serve others. Listen to how similar they are. To serve others to serve others with honor for life. So their next mission is clear and continues to impact the world. 5 years through that experience, to light fires so others may see. Like, it used to say can see. And then I realized, look, it's not up to Max for Max to figure this out. I can only plant the seeds. I can only I can only light fires, and maybe he'll see. They may see, but they might not. It's up to them when they're ready to receive the message and understand it. I think you're a different person. So my mission 5 years ago was different. Now my mission is the same, distilled. And now you hear it 3 years later from when we first met. And it makes more sense to you that actually that's the point of the mission, right? It's always been there. I just had to chip away at it to make it what it is now, to light fires so others may see. I doubt it'll change for the rest of my life. I hope 50 years from now, we're old and we're sitting somewhere gray with beards and no hair and great grandparents, and I'm still getting fired up on a porch somewhere over a bourbon. And you're like, damn it, Joe, you're still just lighting those damn fires. And I'm like, yep, yeah, I got to do it, man. It's my mission. Like, that's why I'm here. I hope that's the case. But thank you for sharing that, because I wasn't clear 5 years ago. Now I'm becoming more clear. And why it's important to go into VC, and it's a very simple filter. I want to invest in founders who are clear. I can't be more clear about their business than they are. And so it's a simple filter. I invest in people that are crystal clear, aligned. Yeah, but thank you for sharing that, man. That meant a lot to me.
Well, for those listening, if you didn't listen to the first episode with Joe, go back and listen to it. But you're, one example, a great example of taking something that was the worst thing that's ever happened to you and turning it into the best thing that's ever happened to you. And you have to do that. And you have to believe that you can do that. And maybe the first time that it happens to you, you discover that you are able to do that. And maybe if it's the first time, there's certainly going to be a period of time where you think there's no coming back from this. There's no way out of this hole. And then habit gets you there, where now you believe when bad things happen that you can turn them into good things. And I kind of just did a video on that last week where a very, very minor bad thing happened. And after the gut punch feeling that you get in the pit of your stomach, after you realize that you've fucked up, realizing that you can turn this into a positive. But a huge part of that too is the true positive is if you can show it to other people, if you can take this bad thing that happened to you and share it with someone else so that they can be better and maybe not have to go through the same bad thing that you went through, is the ultimate way to clear that whole thing in your mind. You've done it more than anyone I can think of, because let's go back to what you said before, if you could mind map the connections, it's endless at this point, honestly. It goes around the whole world, right? Probably.
It's deep.
So,
yeah, it's deep.
And then, but what's important there is that wasn't your goal in the beginning. It was to help one person. The conversation that we're having sitting here is because you tried to help one person. And that's the idea.
You're right. You're absolutely right on that point.
No
question about it. And that's a Mother Teresa quote that I've had on a rock that sits on my desk. You don't have to help 1,000 people. You have to help the person in front of you. And if that is the true, honest, genuine, pure intention to help that one person, I became addicted to how it felt to support a command level master chief find his next great adventure in life. And I did it with all of the unbridled enthusiasms that a young entrepreneur that I felt he made me feel incredibly relevant, like needed, that someone at that level needed my help and support. And I wanted to give everything I could to him. And now it's the same way for founders. I really believe in them, and I don't do well advocating on behalf of me. I do really well advocating on behalf of people I know, care, and love. Like, I will be fierce with that, because you'll notice the leaders who win care fiercely. It's in their nature. So it's been a journey, man. It's and now even seeing where it is, I go back to square one. It's like I have so much to learn again. I'm being challenged every day. I'm learning the battle rhythm of new teammates and all that goes into wonderful new partnerships. And it's funny. We said this at THF, right? I say it now. If you focus on money, you won't get it. Period. And now that I've lived that out twice, I want to say, like, and yet my family's been provided for. I raised over $10 million in a year to do a first close of a fund because I wasn't focused on the fund. I wasn't focused on the money. I was focused on what the world needed based off of a real pain point that I found in the space. And all of a sudden, the money was there. And I'm attracting people to the vision, the mission, and the value set of Fathom who believe deeply what we believe. And I would much rather have an LP base, an investor base in the fund of true believers, that we're trying to bring something much greater into the world. Not just that anybody can just honestly, you can just raise a fund. Fine, go raise a fund. I've got this new algorithm. It'll It doesn't matter. You still come back to how great are the teams, how solid is the leadership, and what type of culture does this company want to create for themselves. And that's the only filter we look at through the world. And one thing for the listeners and for you too as well. So, and then I know we've been doing this for a while, so I want to be conscious of your time too. I like doing this at the end of the day with you though, because we just get into these deep conversations and it's good. When I did research into just like websites and content in the venture capital space, they all look pretty much the same. So when the website, the about, here's the partners, here's our portfolio of companies, here's a little history on the fund, uh, and so on. Literally every venture capital site kind of looks like that. There might be obviously some shinier design elements from one to the other. But if we are true servant capital, this is the phrase we use internal to Fathom, that when you inject servant capital into your organization, you get all of us all the time and all of our resources and all of our network. And if we were going to create something that is in true alignment with our vision, mission, core values, principles, and the ethos of a fund that we hope to create and bring great teams, leadership, and culture into the world, our website should even be only designed for our founders. That's it. Like, we don't matter. We are bringing capital to a deal, and then what we call, time, talent, treasure. We're bringing our time into your company, which represents this. Our talent, which is represented in what we can truly bring from a coaching perspective and a mentorship perspective to the founders. Capital is like over there, but if we were to make capital meaningful, we want it to be servant capital. So we want you to take our money because this is how you're going to get servants. And even in our website. So next year, this is a big content building year. Next year, we're going to launch the world's largest repository for content around teams, leadership, and culture. We're gathering up the best resources from around the world, depending on where you're at. And we're going to literally create the Netflix for founders regarding team, leadership, and culture content. And depending on the time they want to commit, they can come in, they could watch a quick little video, they can watch a longer, deeper conversation on teams, leadership, and culture. We found ourselves saying at Fathom is we see the world through a certain lens, which is teams, leadership, and culture, TLC. So we want our website to actually be the lens that we do in fact see the world, and provide the world and any entrepreneur anywhere around the world. We want to provide them an unbelievable repository of information to consume whenever they are fit. And I have partnerships lined up from Google to, you name it, from a content standpoint, to help provide content at no cost to entrepreneurs around the world.
And okay, so we'll have to circle back on that when it becomes when it's closer to being realized. So we can provide some info on that.
For sure.
So so we've been going for about 2 hours. So I'll start circling around some closing thoughts. And then you and I will have to talk after this and figure out when we can do this again, because there's so much to discuss. And every time we get on a topic, it's amazing. So I would love to do this again if you have some time for it.
Of course, man. These conversations are what matter.
So let me admit here that I was so wrong about something. And it's super clear now, which was a question I had for you before we started. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and the question came up of the greatest innovations. Okay, here's how it started. Talking about what the world's going to look like in 20, 30 years, which, it's unpredictable, but it's fun to speculate. And I said, well, what's crazy is, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, people thought in 2020 we'd have flying cars. And I think the Jetsons was in 2020 or something like that. And, but what do we have? What we have, we take for granted. Let's just say cell phones was, to me, unpredictable. And I think to the average person, they could never have thought we'd have a smartphone, that a camera would be so small, and a cell signal could be so strong around the world, and we could talk to each other in FaceTime and Zoom. And then my question was going to be, but that's what we needed, and so it was born. And my question for you is, what do you? I'm not asking you this now. So here was the original question. What do you think the world needs in 20 years that's more realistic besides flying cars? Because we ended up not needing that. What do you think it's going to be? But, as I sit here now, it's a silly question. The question is, who does the world need? And how do you find them? And, who is going to be the innovator? Who is going to inspire the world? And how is that going to happen, or how can someone make it happen? The question isn't what, it's who, right?
That's right.
Um,
Yep, that's right. Wow,
and
that's just so you know, that's a deep discovery right there. Because like we've talked about, the whats don't matter, right? So what does the world need? The world does not need another widget, another flying car, another gadget, another thingamabob. Um, the who is very similar to the why, and because as much as we talk about it all the time, people are responsible for every great innovation this world has ever seen. So let's just go down to the basics. Who the world needs, um, and then what will they create? But it all starts from a who. It starts from that person. It starts from a human that was inspired in a certain throughout. It comes from a human that was inspired throughout their life based on certain life events that push them in a direction to create something that will change the world. And it's their life experiences that will bring about the next generation of great ideas. And so, again, thinking about the young people out there and going through this crisis, I hope that someone, um, I don't want this to come off wrong, but I hope that someone is impacted so greatly by this at a young age where they feel inspired throughout their youth, their young adulthood, into their most creative years of their lives to create something that makes the world feel safe again. Like that is when I think about, dialing back and thinking about what might come out of this. I'm a constant silver lining guy. So and thinking of all of the silver linings that might come out of this, just as every, Barack Obama inspired a certain type of generation to move into public service. I think the same could be said for Donald Trump. Is inspiring a generation of certain folks to get involved with public service. Um, just as new science discoveries inspire young people going back to the moon, what will that re-inspire? You have all these major who's throughout history that are in fact responsible for amazing things coming out into the world. So I love that you just said that. It's not what does the world need in 20 years, it's who does the world need in 20 years. Um, and we need innovators and we need them now.
yeah, sitting here talking to you, it just became really obvious at one point. And when you kind of discover something like that, it always is really obvious, right? It becomes really clear right away.
Totally.
And then, if I think back, even if I just think about this conversation, we didn't talk about a single thing. We talked about NASA, but we talked about JFK and the janitor. We talked about Mother Teresa and God and you and the team that you've built and the team that you have. And when you talk about companies you invest in, we only talked about people, right? Yeah. And then we talked about the first master chief, the person you helped in the beginning that inspired THF. We only talked about people, and
that's right.
You're investing in people. The product is secondary to the person, and you said that. You've already said literally that. But
yep.
I guess what I'd like to express to people listening is stop. What I've just learned, what I'm going to do is I'm done asking, what does the world need in 20 years and what the next invention is going to be. The question isn't what, it's who, right? It's obvious. Mm-hmm. It's clear. Yep. So if there's one thing that I'll take away from this conversation, but there's not one thing, there's a lot, but if there was one thing, that was a major thing for me right now, because I realized my own question that I had prepared just a couple of days ago, it's not, I was going to say meaningless. I don't know. That might be extreme, but it's the wrong question. It's you're looking I was looking in the wrong places.
Dude, I would say that some of the best coaching that I've received and hope to continue to receive from people who are willing to extend it to me, it has nothing to do with their answers. It has everything to do with their questions. Like it's an art form to sit there and listen to a young person who has all the energy and hopefully aiming it in the right direction for the world. To not go back and say, when I was doing this and or, when I was your age, or, I had an experience like this one time. They, all of that is nonsense. They speak in questions in terms of very the questions they ask are so indicative to all of that experience without it ever being stated. Like, that's when you have a great coach. I've probably had 100 conversations with different potential coaches, finally landed on 2, because I felt like the shit they asked me gave me pause. I had nothing to say in that moment. Nothing, because I had never been asked that before. That's when so for all the people out there who are like, oh, I want to get a coach, I want to get a mentor, great. The first barrier to all of that and filter is, how much talking do they do, and how much listening are you forced to do, and what type of questions are they asking you, to the point where you have nothing to say. Only until you have nothing to say will you find anything worthy of saying. And that, to me, when I found those people who were able to ask me questions and just, like I said, hey, who do you think you are? Like, man, I didn't expect that to be week 1, day 1 shit with you, coach, but all right. And they would just sit there and listen. I'd say it was a 99 to 1%, meaning they would ask me 2 questions in an hour and a half. And I would just sit there and just try to think deeply about it. So if we came away with one thing, which is, through this conversation, which is, who does the world need now? And then who does the world need 20 years from now? That question alone is a deep one, and everyone should, crawl underneath their blankets tonight for the rest of quarantine and try to figure that out.
Or, yeah. Or how you can inspire somebody, if maybe, if you have the opportunity to impart that kind of question on somebody, or that kind of thinking, and maybe, give somebody else that idea, and then spread the word, and maybe, somebody will find the right person and give them the encouragement or the opportunity that they need. And, I don't know how far an idea like that can go from a conversation, but I think it can go really far around the world.
And you can't inspire other people until you yourself are inspired by you. That to me is one thing that's for sure. Everything I've said tonight, I believe, right? I believe in that. There's other stuff that I will go throughout tomorrow and the next day, where I'll say it and I'll be like, I don't know if I believe that. That might be bullshit. I need to look at that like a snake. I need to look at that like a stranger and say, Musselman, do you really believe that shit you just said? And then I'll go back and I'll write it down. I'll look at it and I'll either, believe it, or I'll say, yep, I don't believe that. A simple question, right? Why are so many people walking around not knowing what they believe? That, to me, has been a baffling answer,
Can
and
I
question mark.
can I add something to that real quick?
Yes, of course.
There, I have a thought on that, what you just said, actually. I didn't know you were going to say this, but it actually immediately, I know what I think about that. I think people know when they're doing the wrong thing, what's wrong for them, but they choose not to change it. Because when you're doing the right thing, when you find the right thing, it's obvious, and everything becomes very simple at that point. Your world gets a lot smaller and focused, and your decisions become it's very easy to decision making. You have a lot of clarity. But a lot of people walk around daily, and I'm talking jobs, relationships, lifestyles, any aspect of life, and everyone knows in their heart when they're doing what's not right for them. It's the decision to do something about it that's what baffles me, is choosing to not do anything about it. I think that's what I would challenge people to do, is if something's wrong. If you're in a bad relationship. If you're in a bad job. If you're living a bad lifestyle. Why aren't you taking actions to improve it? Is the question.
Change will happen when the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of change.
Yeah.
No joke.
Sometimes it's mind-boggling.
The reason why I love talking about this, and we definitely should continue the conversation whenever and however you'd like. I just think that the frame that people are walking around in, and hopefully what the great pause, in my opinion, has done for hopefully millions of people, is how often do we sit around and just think about how like people don't even sit down and ask themselves simple questions like, how do I feel about this? How do I feel about that? What comes to mind when I have these types of conversations? Have I ever dug deep enough here? Like, even throughout this conversation today, 2 hours well spent, both of us digging deep into topics that matter. And yet we are in the vast minority of people around the world who are willing to have these types of conversations. That baffles me, man. Like if you're sitting around asking yourself, like, why aren't I'm not happy at work, or I'm not happy in the relationship. Well, how clear are you on what you want? And that's kind of the purpose of the five forces. Like, have you sat down and like actually thought about the vision you would like to bring into the world or work for, or like what your personal mission might actually be in this life? What do you value? Okay, I'm not saying religious. You don't need to be religious to have values. What do you value? Like, where are they? Are they a thing? Are they on paper? Have you defined them? Are you crystal clear? What are actions you know to be true from a guiding principle standpoint? Like, you've acted a certain way throughout your life where you've learned lessons and you've learned how to fail, or you've failed, period. We all have failed, period. Like, end of story. So look at the failures. What's the truths that you've learned from that failure? And how did you react as a result of that failure? You want to keep the things that were great and positive and what you learned, and you want to learn from what was not great and never do that again. It's only a mistake if you do it twice. Period. The first part, mistake, not a mistake. First one, oops. Okay. Second time, that's a mistake. Now it's on you. All right. Now, actually, I'm going to change that. The first time, it's a mistake. The second time, it's a behavior and it's a pattern. So right there, there's no more excuses. The first time, sure, mistake. Definition, made a mistake. My bad. Great. Happens again. Now it's a pattern. Now it's a behavior. So, like, what have you learned from those experiences? Those are your principles. That's like, I have a principle, a guiding principle that says, no relationship will ever change without contact. That's a principle, because I've learned in my life that if I'm confused as why someone's not getting back to me, or I think there might be something wrong, and I start to go down this like matrix of like the what if. Well, wait a minute, man. Just call the person, right? Make contact. Send them a cute little voicemail, give them a video. Hey, man, I'm thinking about you. What's going on? I miss our conversations. And next thing you know, oh, dude, I'm so sorry. I got your emails. I got your text messages. This COVID thing, 3 of my family members have it. I had to fly out to give medical care. It's like, oh, like, okay. I just wanted you to know I'm thinking about you, man. Like, and now you're in my mind and you're in my prayers by name every day. I didn't know that was happening. Let's get back in touch in a few months. But the relationship would not change without contact. So, like, I've learned that. That's a lesson. That's a principle. And not enough people get clear in order to get moving towards what actually will bring them joy.
I'm trying to think if I have anything I could even add to that. You express very complete thoughts, which is really good. I hope I've been able to do a good job asking questions to get out some good information. I feel like we've had a great conversation.
It was phenomenal.
Yeah.
I'm deeply indebted to you for giving me this time and space to talk about this stuff, man. Thank you so much.
No, me to you. Honestly, it's the other way around. Because you've got so much to offer, and you've got a lot of your time is very valuable, figuratively and literally, with all the different projects that you put your time into, and people who seek out guidance from you, and who you've offered guidance to, and all the lives you've touched. So thank you for everything you've done for everyone.
Thanks, Max. I
including me
appreciate it,
right
man.
now.
This is great. We'll do it again.
Well, Joe, this was amazing. Is there anywhere anyone can go if they wanted to check out what you're doing online, or for you or for the company?
Yeah. So, great question. I feel ill-equipped to answer it because this year is the content creation year, where we are having interviews and doing some podcasts, and we're going to interview some pretty remarkable, amazing CEOs. That if I were to mention 10 of them, every single person around the world would know exactly who they are. So I would say expect something really special next year. Basically, Scuttlebutt, um, not quite up to Scuttlebutt level, but these folks are going to be. You'll have to do some of these with me, Max. It'll be fun. But these folks are great, and I only want to go deep. I don't want to stay on the surface. I want to go beneath the surface. And I want to ask them really difficult questions. It will not be prescripted. It will be on the spot and hopefully very real and authentic. But this year is the content creation year. So we're going to start posting, we're going to start having a monthly, um, newsletter. You can do that. You can figure out on how to become a part of that by just going to our splash page right now, which is fathom.vc. And you can sign up for our monthly newsletter, which will begin at the end of this month. And begin to learn about the companies we're investing in, the vision we see for the world, and we want to get to know you. We want to be very intimate with our audience and provide some wonderful content that will change lives.
Okay, great. I will definitely do that as soon as we're off here. I'll go subscribe.
Brother, I appreciate it.
Okay, Joe. Well, thank you again for your time and coming on here. In the background, I've watched it go from day to night where you are.
Yeah, and, that's right.
But the time flew by. I had a absolutely awesome time talking to you.
That's awesome, man. It's great to see you. Genuinely great to see you.
You too. When I'm back in San Diego, I'll have to come visit you up at your place or somewhere.
You got a home to stay, man. Anytime. I mean that.
Cool. Thank you very much. And if you ever want to come to Okinawa, I extend the same invitation to you.
Totally, man. Absolutely.
There's some amazing scuba out here and everything.
I'll talk with you soon.
All right. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye, Max.
Bye.